Welcome back, everyone. This is WJ Live, powered by the Western Journal, where we have clearly set up our Christmas decorations on time. But will we take them down on time? You're going to have to keep watching to find out. My name is Brian Chai. I'm the Deputy Managing Editor of Features for the Western Journal. To my left, I have reporter Michael Austin. To my right, I got reporter Andrew Shasha. We got a whole bunch of topics to get to today, so we're going to kick it right off with yesterday's rally in Georgia, spearheaded by attorneys Sidney Powell and Lin Wood. Lin Wood in particular came under some intense fire from his fellow Republicans, fellow conservatives, and the backlash from his comments were a little surprising. First, let me get to his comments. So Lin Wood said, "They have not earned your vote." They speaking about Kelly Loeffler and David Perdue, who are in Senate runoffs come January 5th, and in what will essentially determine if, assuming Biden is our next president, those runoffs will essentially determine if Biden will operate with a supermajority or whether it's just the House, right? Yeah. So Lin Wood said, "They have not earned your vote. Don't you give it to them. Why would you go back and vote in another rigged election? For God's sake, fix it. You've got to fix it before we'll do it again." What Wood is referring to is some of the intense scrutiny that has fallen on the entirety of the 2020 election. In this particular instance, he is specifically referring to not voting during the January 5th runoff elections. Lin also added, "Do not be fooled twice. This is Georgia. We're not going to go vote on January 5th in another machine made by China." The prevailing theory right now is that one potential avenue of voter fraud during the election were these voting machines with ties to China that are reportedly, easily hackable or what have you. And if you watch the rally, Wood got that audience pretty fired up. However, as much as the audience may have appreciated it, some notable conservatives were not super big fans of it. One conservative that everyone has probably heard of is Newt Gingrich. He tweeted out a pretty scathing remark in response to Wood, as did Allie Beth Stuckey. You can see Gingrich's tweet right there. Lin Wood and Sidney Powell are totally destructive. Every Georgia conservative who cares about America must vote in the runoff. Their don't vote strategy will cripple America. And like I said, it wasn't just Gingrich. Allie Beth Stuckey came through with a little funnier one. Oatmeal for brains, she said in reference to Mr. Wood. The backlash, I gotta say, was a little surprising. But at the same time, not particularly. It does feel like the idea of telling voters not to participate in the runoff election is sort of, as the old saying goes, cutting off your nose to spite your face.
Yep. Absolutely.
And yeah, so Andrew, what do you think is, so given this sort of dichotomy between conservatives and Republicans who recognize the importance of not losing the Senate, and conservatives and Republicans who feel that election integrity is tantamount, which is 100% true. What do you think is the current, where are we headed? What is the GOP, where are we headed on this current trajectory?
I'm certainly hoping not to continue where we are headed. Where we're headed is outright disunity for the party for another 2 to 4 years. I mean, and that's what we've seen for the last 4 years, folks at home. I mean, we know that in 2015, the moment that Donald Trump, came down that escalator and announced his candidacy, there was infighting within the party. And that infighting has persisted throughout the Trump administration. It's persisted in Washington for the entirety of that 4 years. And I'm sincerely hoping that that's not the path we're on, because the path that we're on otherwise is for these Democrats to take the Senate, which, we just lost a seat now. Mark Kelly has been sworn in. Mm-hmm. We are down to a 52-48 vote majority in the Senate for Republicans, and it's a dangerous place, and it's frankly baffling to me that we would, like you said, cut off our nose to spite our face. I don't think people really recognize the weight of a 2-year stint in which the sitting president has legislative mandate. I mean, we saw it in 2016 with Trump, but like I said, the disunity that we had in the party resulted in being unsure of whether we should pursue, tax reform or healthcare, and we went with healthcare for the first year, got sunk into healthcare with a bill that the Republicans were not able to pass. So unfortunately, we're handing over. We're going to see conservatives hand over quite a bit of power. I want to speak directly to the viewers at home. If any of you are in Georgia, personally, I would tell you go vote. Do not, under any circumstances, listen to this attorney. It's foolish, and you will absolutely see 2 years of the Democratic policies that Donald Trump has spoken to you about and said and warned you about and said are dangerous. I mean, you will see those enacted. I would recommend against listening to Mr. Wood.
Yeah, giving the Democrats control of the Senate, the House, and the presidency, that's not just cutting off your nose to spite your face. That's cutting off your whole head. Yep. Like, it makes no sense. And all of those things you just said are true. Like, they're just going to have unfettered access to do all of the crazy policy things that we all fear that they might do if they're given this power. So I think Lin Wood is justifiably getting a lot of pushback for what is a really crazy statement. And, election integrity, if we lose all those elections, the Democrats aren't going to fight for election integrity. So you're just, you're cutting yourself at the knees, you're cutting your head off, you're cutting your nose off to spite your face. You're doing all of it. It's horrible.
That sounds really painful.
Yes.
I will say, just as sort of like to play a little bit counter argument here, is I will say Obama did have 2 years of a supermajority.
Yes.
And we didn't become a socialist country.
No.
I mean, he did try his darndest to get us to that point, but it didn't happen.
But we did. I want to interject here. We did see the enactment of the Affordable Care Act, which, I mean, sure, three of its legs now have been thrown out by the United States Supreme Court, but we have been fighting for effectively 8 years since. Conservatives have been fighting to repeal this bill that was enacted in that supermajority era. I mean, that is a lot of power.
Yeah, please don't get me wrong. A Biden supermajority would not be good for us, period. I'm just trying to see some of the silver lining here. And I do have to say, I don't think I'm a particularly huge fan of this. I'm just going to go out and call it a false dichotomy that, your choices are either don't vote at all or, you're supporting voter fraud. Like, that's not the case. I think you can both vote for Loeffler and Perdue and, keep up the good fight against potential election fraud.
Absolutely.
So given that, guys, so I think the short-term play is probably, like I said, I think it's a little misguided, but I can at least see it,
Right.
Lin Wood is drumming up some legitimate, fervent passion. He's telling his audience to let your voices be heard, demand election accountability by any means necessary, even if it may end up with a Biden supermajority, which is a bad idea. So that's obviously the short-term play. Mike, I'll kick this over to you real quick. What do you think are some potential long-term ramifications if the GOP continues down this path where it seems like there are some key conservative values that I think unite all Republicans and conservatives.
Yeah.
But it does start to seem like it's you're either with Trump or you're not GOP. Like, those are starting to almost seem like the two options.
Yeah. Going forward, like, we know right now that the Democrats there's a lot of infighting. We talked about it on the podcast yesterday. The progressives are really starting to get pissed off with the moderates and vice versa. And it's giving the Republicans a real chance to jump in there, get more in line with the minority vote, get more support from moderate Democrats. But if we don't get all of our ducks in a row and we allow this sort of stuff to keep happening, we're going to lose a golden opportunity to, we could have a supermajority soon enough.
Yep. 1,000%.
So it's a real shame because Trump has opened the door for us to do a lot of great things.
100%.
And he's also, the tragedy of Trump is while he does a great job in a lot of areas, his rhetoric is also really divisive. And if we don't come together soon, we're going to lose that opportunity, and we might just see a fracturing of the Republican Party going forward. So
Which would be
really bad.
It's a very scary
thought. And even though the Democrats are starting to fracture a little bit, they do have a lot of policy stances that they're pretty unified behind. And they've always been better than Republicans at reaching out to the masses, at creating narratives of why
it's those snappy slogans that Obama was talking about.
Why their policies are morally superior, and we have yet to really enter that domain to do that effectively. Trump got us a lot closer, but we're not very good at the narrative game. And so this is when it needs to start. And if we don't start it now, we're going to miss our opportunity.
No, you're absolutely right. I think as long as I've been alive, not that long, admittedly, I mean,
same.
I have seen Republicans just absolutely manage to squander every opportunity to play the long game. And I agree with you, Brian. I didn't want to kind of jump on your toes earlier that it is imperative to play the short game as well. We can't forget that this election mattered. This election still matters. And that if there was voter fraud, as Tucker Carlson has said about Sidney Powell after their little squabble a couple weeks back, if that voter fraud is real, if this is proven, it was the worst crime that was ever perpetrated against the American people, period.
Without a doubt.
It's the single greatest crime ever perpetrated against the American people. And so I don't want to go against that possibility that's there. I don't necessarily, from what I've seen, I'm not sure that it is as widespread as we've spoken about and as we've heard about. So I think that in that you need to, in terms of political strategy, you need to think about the long game. And that's where the problem is the long game. You're asking, what is it? It doesn't exist for the Republican Party right now. I don't think anyone's thinking about it, except for, interestingly enough, Donald Trump, because as you said, Newt Gingrich talked about how destructive this rhetoric from Lin Wood was. Donald Trump said outright on the 27th of November that people who are saying that, Republicans shouldn't go out and vote in the Georgia runoffs in January, he said absolutely not. He tweeted out on the 27th, no, the 2020 election was a total scam. We won by a lot, and will hopefully turn over the fraudulent result. But we must get out and help David and Kelly, two great people. Otherwise, we are playing right into the hands of some very sick people. I will be in Georgia on Saturday. That's what he said last week. And now what I wanted to touch on today was that we had a perfect example of this week was that Kelly Loeffler pointed out Reverend Warnock, her opponent, has spoken on quite a few absolutely radical progressive agenda items over the course of his campaign and before he got started politically. There was a sermon that he gave at one point in I believe it was 2014, shortly after legislation was passed that would allow for folks to conceal carry in houses of worship. He essentially riffed on that in front of the congregation and made light of that idea. Why would you ever need guns in a church? There's no reason that you should need that. Of course, what was it last year? We saw that we absolutely do need that, right? Because when folks are gunned down in a church, there is the opportunity for that good guy with a gun scenario that the conservatives like to talk about. And clearly it's accurate. I mean, some of you at home have, you guys carry firearms for this reason. And to be made fun of in that way by the left it's not only appalling, it's not only incredibly...
It's patronizing.
It's patronizing, exactly. And so we are seeing that the left is united on some of those very strong radical agenda items. Maybe not everyone on the other side is AOC, but they certainly, are buying into getting together and fighting against what Republicans want for what they want. I mean, McCarthy pointed out this week, the House Majority Leader for the Republicans, he pointed out that the Democrats in the House are stonewalling COVID-19 relief, a second round of relief financially.
Yes, they are.
While they pursue marijuana legalization legislation and a bill to end tiger ownership in the United States in light of kind of what's been brought about by Tiger King with kind of the bad conditions in those zoos. This is a party that at least knows what it wants. Their priorities may be completely out of whack, but they're straight. They have them straight. Republicans do not have that same game being played right now with the long game. And so what I want to ask you guys is, do you agree? Are Republicans and conservatives, are we worse? Are the people on the right side of the aisle worse at getting the messaging together and fighting in a united front, knowing where the opposition is? It's not within our party, but it's on the other side, and what we need to do to essentially defeat that. I mean, are we worse at that?
Yeah. I think we are worse at that. What has really helped us, so Trump kind of served as that unifying message.
Yes.
We just followed a lot of the things that he said. Everybody in the party did. And that really seemed to work in a lot of ways. His departure, which is really likely to happen at this point, is leaving a vacuum.
Yes.
And they're going to need to fill that vacuum with something, with some strong message, with some unifying theme. And we have yet to see that. You know, the election was just happened.
Yes.
So they're going to need a little time to put that together. But whether it's more strong Republican figures coming forward or just better messaging, like we're starting to see glimpses of this, like with, you know, Kimberly Klacik and different younger conservatives that are really good at the narrative stuff.
Yes.
But in terms of like in our government, yeah, we have yet to see them rally behind something. But, you know, because of Trump, because of people like Klacik, because of those figures, I think that definitely something could be coming within the next 2 years that we can all really rally behind, that really gets our party together. But yeah, we have some work to do. And it is, the Republicans have a history of not being able to do that.
Yes.
So
Yeah, I will say one of the most powerful and effective things Trump has pulled off in his first term is sort of bringing that, you know, power of personality, the, you know, the punchiness of his rhetoric to a Republican group that has, you know, often been mischaracterized by the left as stodgy and stuffy and boring, and Trump has done a wonderful job fighting back against that narrative. One potential issue that I see with that, however, is, you know, whether Trump successfully overturns the 2020 election or whether he runs again in 2024 and wins. No matter what, at most, we have 4 more years of President Donald Trump. That's it, period. That's the absolute most we can get. And, you know, what, as Mike alluded to, who fills that vacuum? Because we've seen Trump work. 2016, Trump won. We've seen the policies that he's implemented in his 4 years in office. We've seen Trump work. We haven't seen any other Republican take the Trump playbook, which has been so effective for us, and make that work. I think that will be, figuring that out sooner than later is going to be really, really important for the GOP. And like I said, you know, maybe somehow, some way, maybe we get 4 more years of Trump, in which case he can keep doing what he's doing, and it'll keep being effective the way it's been. The problem is, what are the GOP plans post-Trump? Because like you said, I'm not sure we have a solidified plan post-Trump. Now, to be clear, I don't think Democrats do either. I mean, they just nominated and, you know, potentially got a, you know, will soon be an octogenarian into the White House. So that's not exactly brimming with, you know, youth and potential. But yeah, I think figuring out our plans post-Trump is as important as any policy issue that Republicans can possibly have right now.
And I think, to your point, Brian, I think the idea that we always hear, and I've said this many times, that, you know, Trump did bring a rhetorical angle to the party that was desperately needed.
Yes.
Republicans were not fighters before President Trump. Not only do I think that was needed, and I think that in certain instances it went over the line, but it was good. He also, the irony of these Republicans who want to continue to foment the disunity that was had during the Republican primary in 2015, 2016, is that he also brought the ability to get on message to the White House. I've said this to my mother on a number of occasions, and to other, you know, more strong Trump supporters in my circle of friends than I am. I'm more traditionally conservative. Those folks, I mean, Trump did more for folks like myself with, you know, the appointment of judges, with the tax reform bill.
Yeah.
I mean, he's done more for the traditional conservative than even he's been allowed to accomplish for his base. I mean, the wall is not yet done because of, you know, partially what the Republican establishment has prevented. And so I guess what I want to ask you guys, we saw this in, you know, we were young. We saw this with the Tea Party. When Obama kind of started talking about the Affordable Care Act and some of his other more radical policy items, Republicans got on message together, and the Tea Party really, you know, it was created. We talked about deficits again. We talked about more important liberty issues. Unfortunately, it just didn't translate. When we finally got the chance to run a presidential candidate, the rhetoric wasn't. We weren't together as a party. Even if things were accomplished in Trump's time, we weren't on the same page going forward. We weren't in the Tea Party, we're at war mindset. How do you guys think that how do we translate that? Whether it's after 4 more years of Trump or whether it's after 4 years of Biden, how do we not simply get on message to win an election? How do we get on message to stay together on message against a Democratic platform once we regain full control of Washington?
I think the first thing that conservatives have to do is, acknowledge that there are certain tenets of conservatism that should be universal.
Yes.
It blows my mind that something, a country, a nation literally can't be sovereign without borders. No. And yet somehow that's become this hot topic issue. And Democrats have done a surprisingly good job framing that as this, if you want borders, you're racist. And as stupid of an argument as that is, it works. It plays to their base perfectly. When it comes to conservatives, when we talk about something like the border wall, it feels like we're coming at it from different angles, whether it's national security, like economics, drugs. And it does feel like we need to figure out what is most important about the wall. Mm-hmm. How do we, for lack of a better term, simplify it? How do do we get it down, distill it to its most important concepts and push that? And I think part of that is going to involve, a new kind of young blood in the Republican Party, people who can see this through. Again, Trump has done that so well, but he is not a spring chicken. He is 74 right now.
Something like that.
Something like that.
There.
So he's in his 70s. With Trump, doing as good a job as he's doing, like I said, it's either he's got 4 more years or he's also getting up there in age. Mm-hmm. If we can start cultivating, finding, you mentioned Kim Klacik. Yeah. She's a great example of a young, well-spoken, intelligent conservative who can, carry that torch, carry that flag for years and years to come. And I think having the continuity, that's how you craft a message. With Democrats, it feels like, Pelosi and Biden and Schumer have just been there forever. Like they've had that time to, as much as we don't agree with their leadership, that leadership has been in place for a while. And I think that's helped them craft a unified message over the long haul.
And kind of going off what you were saying about how the left will call anyone racist who disagrees with them. The left has always been good at making the moral argument. And conservatives, meanwhile, are just good at making the numerical argument or the logical argument.
Darn those facts.
When you have logic versus feelings going up against each other, feelings are going to win out in the end. So one of the biggest things we need to start doing is we need to start making the moral argument for, okay, why is it moral to have lower taxes? Why is someone not, why do people not have the right to your services? Things like that. And the Democrats have just done a great job of getting behind their arguments with a moral bent to why they believe in them. And one of the biggest issues unifying Democrats today, kind of what they see as today's civil rights movement, is transgenderism. And Joe Biden, back in October, he pledged to sign a bill that would alter the Civil Rights Act by adding protections for people based on sexual preferences and gender identity. And it's a pretty radical proposal for a number of reasons that we'll go into in a bit. But this past week, Chuck Schumer just came out and said, yeah, I fully support that, and we're going to pursue that when Biden enters office. And what you're starting to see is that it's looking like transgenderism is going to be a big issue for the Biden camp, for Democrats going forward in the next few years. And what they want is to allow biological males, so transgender women who are biological men, they want to allow them full access to female rights and privileges and arenas like sports, like locker rooms, bathrooms. There's really no stop to how far they could go. Like, even women's shelters for like women that have been abused by men, There's no reason that those men, that transgender women, biological men, would not be allowed into those spaces as well. So there's all kinds of crazy stuff that would come out of this. And it's really troubling to see that the Democrats, like it's looking like they have a real chance at getting a lot of this stuff into law. And one of the biggest problems I have with adding gender identity protections is that you already have sex-based protections for women and men. You can't have both sex-based and gender-based protections. The reason for that is that gender identity is just your personal preference. It's based on your feelings. You can be whatever gender you want to be whenever you want to be. So biological men would get all of the rights and privileges, and they could get to go wherever they want that women go. So women don't have any rights at that point. And, you know, women's sex-based rights are based on like women's specific biological differences, the fact that they have a significant reproductive burden that men don't have to face, you know, things like that. And historically, before we had big advances in technology, you know, this kept women from entering the workplace in the numbers that we're seeing today, and along with discrimination for sure. But I wanted to turn this over to you guys and just ask you, like, do you think this is a winning issue for the Democrats? Do you think they're actually going to get some of this stuff done? Or do you think that the average American voter is not going to get behind letting biological men into women's locker rooms, into women's bathrooms, into women's sports?
I mean, I think that unfortunately it will be a winning issue, not because it's right, but because of what we were just speaking about earlier, is the emotional argument.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the same reason that a number of issues have become typical everyday Democratic talking points. I mean, you talked about the wall. We've talked about immigration. I mean, when you can assign an issue to a person and then you can make a moral plight out of them and just generalize them in that way and generalize them to their plight, you can absolutely control the dialogue. I mean, like my family members, my friends, like the people that you pass by on the street, do they want to shut down, you know, the rights, quote unquote, of someone who's struggling with, you know, gender identity disorder? Do they want to essentially infringe upon them or kind of prohibit them from living, you know, their best life, loving who they love, feeling how they feel? No. The average American wants to be left alone, and they want other people to be left alone. So unfortunately, because we have not kind of gotten into, as conservatives, we have not spoken well enough and loudly enough about how transgenderism impacts the people who are transgender.
Yes.
How the unproven medical solutions to these problems, you know, things like your hormone replacement therapies and things of that nature. We haven't spoken about how that hurts people. So until we get on that moral page and say this is hurting someone, it's not helping them. We don't tell people who are, and I know this is going to offend some folks, but we don't tell people who are schizophrenic that, you know, the voices in their head are legitimate, that we should be, you know, you should be catering to the voices in your head. We tell them, you know, there's something disordered in your thinking that is resulting in a differential, you know, variation between the outside world and what's going on in your mind, and we need to get at that, not make the world reflect what's in your head. And we're hurting those folks. So unfortunately, if we can't get on page with the, you know, what's immoral about how the left wants to handle that issue, we're never going to solve it.
Yeah, I do think, as far as your original question, is this a winning issue for Democrats? I think it is, only because, how do I put this? Strong and loud feelings are the enemy of nuance. And I feel like Republicans, you know, I largely think Republicans and conservatives do try to be nuanced and, you know, adults, essentially. But, you know, even if someone had a, say, kind of middle of the road take, oh, you know, if someone felt I'm fine with people who want to be transgender, you know, like Andrew said, like, love who you want, live your life how you want, but I'm not sure I'm comfortable with someone who's still mostly, you know, biologically male competing in girls sports,
right?
They would get screamed at. You're a bigot. You know, they would be torn, they would be shamed into silence. And, you know, that's the problem, is it feels like one tactic that Democrats have perfected over the years that I think is everything is black or white. You are either completely open-minded and with us, or you're a closed-minded bigot.
Yeah.
And that is actually, which is why I got such a kick out of, I think that is one tactic Trump actually lifted from the Democrats is Trump also likes to paint things in very black and white. There's no gray area with Trump. And just watching him turn that around on Democrats and leftists and watching them freak out about it is pretty hilarious to me. But yeah, unfortunately, it does seem like it'll be a very winning and winnable issue for Democrats because of this societal discourse they've created where, you're either 100% on board with everything transgender or you're not, or you're a hateful bigot. Like those are the only two options they'll present to you.
Yeah, I think there is a little bit of hope for conservatives on this issue. I mean, a lot of these things will probably get implemented, but once they do, like normal everyday women that have men walking into their locker rooms, because it's going to happen, they're not going to like that. We've seen so many stories of transgender boys that are transgender women, biological men racing against women in women's track and them just dominating, winning all the awards, setting records.
Yep. Connecticut.
Those girls don't like that. The parents don't like that. That's obviously like conservatives aren't doing a good job of the narrative, but the truth is revealing itself for everyone to see. So if that continues to happen more and more, I think a lot of these things could get pushed back. And in terms of hormone therapy and stuff, we do have a lot of hope in terms of what just happened in the UK with a court overruling gender reassignment for children who have yet to undergo puberty. I think it's children under 16 or something like that. So I'd like it for it to be probably people under 21, but I'll take what I can get. But there's definitely some hope. Will it stop a lot of these things from getting pushed through in the next 4 years? I don't know, but I think not everything is as hopeless as we might like to believe.
Yeah, I am actually really curious to see what happens if we ever kind of inevitably jump the shark where, for example, let's say there is a, lower tier NBA player whose career is going nowhere and all of a sudden decides he's a woman. And goes through the process and just goes into WNBA and just trounces everyone.
We've seen this with boxers already. There are biologically male boxers who are beating the snot out of female boxers. And I mean, like, how is this acceptable in any way? And I think that's kind of my one. I don't think you're wrong, Michael. I think there absolutely is hope that people will eventually see the truth. My worry with the kind of the underlying truth method of winning the battle is that how many people get hurt along the way. If we don't win out in the discourse, how many people get hurt until society and the culture wake up and say, oh, that was wrong. That was a bad decision. I think that's tragic. I mean, the reason that we're talking about kind of the UK hormone replacement therapy ban for under 16s or under 17s is because, certain folks stepped forward and sued. I mean, it's a win, but that's a tragedy. That's heartbreaking to see that someone has gone through hormone replacement therapy, absolutely devastated their body, and they're going to go through the rest of their life with that weight now.
And conservatives need to get better at messaging and narratives. This ties back into everything else we were talking about, and that's something that here at the Western Journal, here at WJ Live, we are actively working on every single day. So.
And that is WJ Live presented by the Western Journal. You can catch us every day at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific. And we actually do have something to ask of you guys. If you could help us out, it would be a major, major help. If you're an audio listener, please go to youtube.com/WJ Live. Click the subscribe button as well as clicking on the bell.
Ding.
Okay, wow.
It was him this
I was
time.
kind of really hoping we could skip that. All right. And hit the bell to be notified when new episodes go live. If you're already watching us on YouTube, you can also be a big help by going and subscribing to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, however you do listen to podcasts. And you can subscribe to us as well as leave us a 5-star review. That would be a major, major help for us here. And lastly, if you still feel compelled yet to help us out more, you can go to westernjournal.com/join, and you can actually subscribe directly to our site. That helps us out in ways you can't even imagine. It helps us combat, misinformation campaigns from the left, from social media giants that are essentially owned and run by leftists. And we hope you enjoyed this episode. We did cover kind of a lot of ground, so we are just about out of time. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and thanks for watching.
Hi, my name is Samantha, and I'm the community manager for the Western Journal. We've really enjoyed recording WJ Live these last few weeks, and we have some exciting news.
We are now on Apple Podcasts, but we need to ask you a favor.
In order to equip even more listeners with the truth and fight against big tech,
we need to get more subscribers and reviews.
So please, go find WJ Live on Apple Podcasts. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and leave a 5-star review. Oh, and tell them you want to see more of me on the podcast.
Thank you for helping us out. And don't forget that you can catch a new episode of WJ Live every Tuesday and Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific on YouTube and now Apple Podcasts.